Good morning, everyone. I am Sang Sokea, a graduate student at Pukyong National University. Today, I'm excited to present a fascinating research paper that explores the intersection of artificial intelligence, genetics, and personality traits. The paper I'll be discussing is titled A Pilot Study Using AI for Genetic Effects on Personality, ABO Blood Type in Japan, Korea, authored by Masayuki Kanazawa from the Human Sciences ABO Center in Tokyo, Japan. This research was published on July 18, 2023, and it represents an innovative approach to understanding how our genetics, specifically blood type, might influence our personality traits. Before diving into the details, let me explain why this research is particularly interesting. In East Asian countries, especially Japan and Korea, there's a long-standing cultural belief about blood types influencing personality. While this idea might seem unusual to some, this study applies modern artificial intelligence techniques to examine whether there might be any scientific basis to these cultural observations. The study combines traditional psychological assessment methods with cutting-edge AI analysis, examining data from both Japanese and Korean populations. This cross-cultural approach helps us understand not just the potential genetic influences on personality, but also how these influences might manifest differently across different cultural contexts. Throughout this presentation, I'll walk you through the methodology, findings, and implications of this research. We'll explore how the researchers used AI to detect patterns that might be missed by conventional statistical methods, and what this means for our understanding of personality development. Here are the content following from abstraction to conclusion. Let's start with what we already know. Scientists believe that about half of our personality comes from our genes. However, it's been hard to prove this with regular personality tests. Interestingly, in countries like Japan, Korea, and Taiwan, many people strongly believe that blood type influences personality. This belief sparked the research interest. For our study, we collected data from two groups: a large Japanese group with 1,827 participants, a Korean group with 482 participants. The author combined traditional statistical methods with modern AI analysis to get the most comprehensive results possible. What did the author find? The results show that there is indeed a relationship between blood type and how people describe their own personality traits. These findings matched what we expected to see based on cultural beliefs in these countries. This study suggests something interesting. The connection between blood type and personality might be part of a bigger picture of how genes influence who we are. We also looked at how much people's interest in personality affects their responses and considered evolutionary psychology factors. The paper study examines how genes influence personality, focusing specifically on blood type. When we say genetic factors contribute to 50% of personality, we mean that half of our personality traits might be inherited from our parents, while the other half comes from our environment and experiences. We'll start with twin studies, which have been crucial in understanding genetic influence. We study two types of twins: monozygotic twins who share identical DNA, and dizygotic twins who share about 50% of their genetic makeup. This comparison helps us understand genetic influence on various traits. Genome research has made remarkable progress since 2003. Major breakthroughs include the Human Genome Project and the discovery of over 1,200 genetic markers linked to educational achievement. However, authors still face challenges in understanding how genes influence personality. In East Asia, particularly Japan and Korea, there's a strong cultural belief in blood type influencing personality. About half the population believes in this connection. Recent studies have expanded to include connections with gut microbiota and mental health. The current study compares Japanese and Korean populations using both traditional methods and AI analysis. Authors have several advantages, including large sample sizes and populations highly aware of their blood types. Let me now explain how authors are using artificial intelligence in this study, which represents an innovative approach to personality research. Think of personality like a complex puzzle. Traditional research methods are like trying to solve this puzzle by looking at each piece separately. These methods assume simple relationships, like saying if A happens, then B always follows. But personality doesn't work that simply. Let me break down why author needed AI. First, consider how personality works in real life. Your personality traits might show up differently depending on your age, gender, or situation. Traditional statistical methods, which mostly look for straightforward connections, struggle with this complexity. It's like trying to draw a map using only straight lines when the real path has many curves and turns. This is where AI comes in. Artificial intelligence works more like the human brain. It can spot complex patterns and understand when multiple factors work together. Let me give you an example. While traditional methods might just look for direct connections between blood type and a single personality trait, AI can analyze how blood type, age, gender, and multiple personality traits all interact together. We're using what's called supervised learning. Imagine teaching a student by showing them many examples until they learn to recognize patterns. We feed the AI information about people's personality traits and blood types, and it learns to spot patterns that might be too subtle or complex for traditional methods to catch. Why is this innovative? Most previous studies assumed blood type would influence personality in a straightforward way. Author AI approach allows to test whether the relationship might be more subtle and complex. It's like having a sophisticated detective who can piece together clues that might seem unrelated at first glance. This combination of AI with traditional research methods gives author a more complete picture of how blood type might relate to personality, helping author understand these relationships in ways that weren't possible before. Let me walk you through how author designed and conducted this study. The methodology was carefully planned to gather reliable data about personality and blood type relationships. Let me explain each component in detail. Author chose crowdsourcing as data collection method. You might wonder, why crowdsourcing? The answer lies in our need for artificial intelligence analysis. AI requires large amounts of data to identify reliable patterns. Crowdsourcing allowed to reach thousands of participants efficiently. Paper used two well-established personality tests. First, the TIPI test, that stands for 10-item personality inventory. While it originally uses a 7-point scale, author modified it to a 5-point scale to maintain consistency across study. The second test was the BFI, or Big Five inventory. Interestingly, we used different versions for each country. In Japan, we used version 2 with 60 questions. In Korea, we used version 1 with 44 questions. This difference exists because version 2 hasn't been officially adapted for Korean use yet. The paper study included two main groups. In Japan, we had 1,827 participants, almost evenly split between men and women, with ages ranging from 20 to 59 years. The average age was 40.3 years. Our Korean sample was smaller but still substantial, with 482 participants. Again, we maintained a good gender balance with 247 men and 235 women, and a similar age range, averaging 39.9 years. For assessing blood type personality traits, author used slightly different approaches in each country. The Japanese study used 8 items, with 2 questions for each blood type, A, B, O, and AB. The Korean study used 9 items, with a varying number of questions for each blood type. Each participant rated how well they felt their personality matched these blood type traits on a scale of 1 to 5. Additionally, author asked about their belief in and knowledge of blood type personality relationships. This comprehensive approach allowed author to gather rich data while maintaining scientific rigor. The careful balance of standardized tests with culture-specific elements helped ensure results would be both reliable and relevant. The analytical strategy section outlines the methodological approach taken in this research paper. The researchers established specific criteria for selecting blood type traits. The paper emphasizes psychological personality assessment methods, carefully choosing traits that met several key conditions. These traits needed to show consistency with previous academic studies, demonstrate significant statistical differences, and maintain balanced mean values near 50%. The researchers deliberately avoided extreme values to ensure reliability. For the technical implementation, the paper describes using Microsoft Azure Machine Learning, a cloud-based AI system. Due to sample size limitations in the Korean study of 500 individuals, the researchers determined that AI-based blood type prediction would be feasible only for the Japanese participant group. The data analysis process involved dividing the dataset into 2 portions. In Japan, we used version 2 with 60 questions. In Korea, we used version 1 with 44 questions. This difference exists because version 2 hasn't been officially adapted for Korean use yet. 70% used for testing blood type predictions. The paper employed AUC, area under the curve, as the primary evaluation metric. This measurement provides a clear scale where 0.5 indicates prediction at random chance level, 1.0 represents perfect prediction accuracy. For the specific case of blood type classification, which involves 4 distinct categories, the researchers utilized a weighted AUC approach. This adaptation was necessary to account for the multiple classification nature of blood types rather than simple binary classification. The methodology demonstrates how the researchers balance traditional psychological assessment with modern machine learning techniques to investigate blood type personality correlations. The research paper presents fascinating findings from Analysis 1, which examined the relationship between blood type and the Big Five personality traits in both Japanese and Korean populations. Let me walk you through these results in detail. Starting with the Japanese study, the researchers found something quite interesting when analyzing both personality tests, the Type IJ and BFI2J. None of the personality factors showed statistical significance. To put this in simpler terms, they couldn't find any strong mathematical connection between blood type and the main personality traits measured by these tests. The researchers used what's called the Holmes correction. This is a statistical method that helps prevent false positive results when doing multiple comparisons. Even before applying this strict statistical filter, no significant relationships emerged. The Japanese participants' beliefs about blood type and personality revealed an intriguing pattern. The majority of people believed there was at least some connection. About 7.6% believed there was a strong relationship, while 22.6% thought there was a moderate connection. This shows that despite the lack of statistical evidence, many people hold these beliefs. Moving to the Korean study, the results showed some initial promise, but ultimately reached similar conclusions. Two factors related to extraversion, how outgoing someone is, initially showed statistical significance. However, when the researchers applied the Holmes correction, these relationships also failed to meet the statistical threshold. What's particularly interesting is that the Korean participants showed even stronger beliefs in blood type personality connections than their Japanese counterparts. A substantial 12.2% believed in a strong relationship, and 40.6% believed in a moderate connection. This suggests that cultural beliefs about blood type and personality might be even more pronounced in Korea. The paper's findings highlight an important contrast between cultural beliefs and statistical evidence. While many people in both countries believe in blood type personality relationships, the standardized personality tests didn't support these beliefs when subjected to rigorous statistical analysis. This analysis sets the stage for understanding why the researchers then looked at more specific trait relationships, which we'll explore in the next section. Let's explore Analysis 2, which focuses on the relationship between blood type and specific personality traits. This analysis revealed some fascinating patterns that distinguish it from the broader personality test results we discussed earlier. In the Japanese study, the researchers discovered something quite remarkable. Every single blood type trait they examined showed statistical significance. Now, what does this mean in practical terms? When statisticians say something is significant, they mean the pattern they found is unlikely to have occurred by chance. In this case, the significance remained even after applying the Holmes correction, which is a very stringent statistical test. The researchers used a measurement called eta squared, to determine how strong these relationships were. The maximum value they found was 0.033, or about 3.3%. While this might seem small, it's important to understand that in personality research, even small effects can be meaningful because personality is influenced by so many different factors. What makes these findings particularly interesting is that the highest scores for each trait consistently matched the participants' actual blood types. This suggests that people tend to identify with the personality traits traditionally associated with their blood type in Japanese culture. Moving to the Korean study, the results showed a similar pattern, but with some nuances. Three blood types, A, B, and O, showed significant relationships with their associated traits. These relationships held up even after the strict Holmes correction. The effect sizes were similar to the Japanese study, with the strongest effect being 0.030 or 3%. However, there was one exception. Type AB showed no significant relationship. The researchers attribute this to having the smallest sample size for this blood type, only 47 participants, which makes it harder to detect statistical patterns reliably. Let's put these findings in context. While the effects are relatively small, they are consistent across both countries and across different blood types. This suggests that while blood type might not dramatically shape personality, it might have a subtle but real influence on certain specific traits. These results are particularly interesting when compared to the previous analysis of broad personality factors. While the big five personality traits showed no significant relationships with blood type, these more specific trait associations did show consistent patterns. This suggests that blood type's influence on personality might be more nuanced than previously thought. The third analysis of this research paper explores how artificial intelligence performed in predicting blood types from personality traits. Let me break down these fascinating results and explain what they mean. First, let's understand what AUC means. It stands for area under the curve. Think of it as a score between 0.5 and 1.0, where 0.5 means the predictions are no better than random guessing, and 1.0 means perfect prediction. The researchers used a weighted version of this score because they were dealing with 4 different blood types rather than a simple yes-no prediction. The results showed a clear pattern of prediction accuracy across different tests. The blood type traits, using just 8 specifically chosen items, achieved the highest prediction accuracy with an AUC of 0.603. To put this in perspective, this means the AI could predict someone's blood type better than chance, using just these 8 carefully selected questions about personality traits. The BFI, which is the longer personality test with 60 items, came in second with an AUC of 0.564. This is particularly interesting because even though it had many more questions, it couldn't predict blood type as accurately as the specific blood type traits. The Type E, the shortest test with only 10 items, showed the lowest prediction accuracy with an AUC of 0.515. While this is still slightly better than random guessing, it's notably lower than the other methods. These results tell us something important. More questions don't necessarily mean better predictions. What matters more is asking the right questions. The blood type traits, though fewer in number, were more effective at predicting blood type than the longer personality tests. Another interesting observation is that tests with more items generally performed better than those with fewer items. This suggests that having more data points helps the AI make better predictions, but only up to a point. The quality of the questions matters more than quantity. These findings support the paper's earlier results about specific traits being more relevant than broad personality factors. The AI was most successful when using questions specifically designed to assess blood type related traits rather than general personality characteristics. Section 5.1 Consistency with previous studies examines how the research findings align with previous studies in this field. Let me walk you through the fascinating patterns that emerged from this analysis. The researchers first examined the Big Five personality test results. These comprehensive tests, which measure broad personality dimensions, showed no statistically significant relationship with blood type after applying the Holmes correction. This finding appeared in both the Japanese and Korean studies, though the Korean data initially showed some connection with extroversion before the statistical correction. What makes this particularly interesting is how it aligns with previous research, attempts to find connections between blood type and broad personality traits. Think of it like trying to find a specific conversation in a crowded room. The broader the noise, the harder it is to detect specific patterns. Moving to the blood type traits, the research revealed something quite remarkable. When looking at specific personality characteristics traditionally associated with blood types, clear patterns emerged. These weren't random correlations. Participants consistently scored highest on traits traditionally linked to their own blood type. This pattern appeared in both Japanese and Korean populations, with one exception: Korean type AB, which had a smaller sample size that made statistical patterns harder to detect. The study also revealed an intriguing relationship between test size and results when comparing the shorter TP test, 10 questions, with the longer BFI test, 60 questions in Japan, 44 in Korea. The researchers found that larger tests were better at detecting subtle differences. Think of it like using a more powerful microscope. You can see details that might be missed with similar tools. This relationship between test size and detection ability carried through to the AI predictions. The BFI, with its larger number of questions, achieved higher prediction accuracy than the TIPI. However, and this is crucial, the specifically targeted blood type traits, despite being fewer in number, outperformed both general personality tests in predicting blood type. These findings present an important lesson about personality research. Sometimes less is more, but only if you're measuring the right things. The specific blood type traits, though fewer in number, proved more effective at detecting relationships than broader personality measures with more questions. Let me guide you through section 5.2, Personality Sensitivity, which explores an intriguing aspect of personality research. Personality sensitivity, or how aware people are of their own personality traits. In looking at what affects personality test scores, the researchers made a fascinating discovery. While we often focus on factors like gender and age, they found that a person's interest in personality itself has an even stronger influence than these traditional factors. Imagine having different strength settings on a camera. Personality sensitivity acts like the clarity setting for how people view their own traits. The study examined this through the BFI's N scale, which measures emotional stability and neuroticism. The results were remarkable. Out of 12 questionnaire items, 11 showed significant differences based on how interested people were in personality. After applying strict statistical corrections, 10 items still maintain the significance. What makes this particularly interesting is that these correlations appeared in questions measuring both positive and negative traits. Let me explain why this is surprising. People who showed more interest in personality scored higher on seemingly opposite traits. It's as if being interested in personality makes you more likely to recognize all aspects of your personality, whether they seem contradictory or not. The statistical impact was substantial. The researchers found an I-squared, ETA-squared value of 0.181 for the openness factor. In plain terms, this means that simply being interested in personality explained about 18.1% of the differences in how people scored on the openness scale. To put this in perspective, since genetic factors are thought to influence about 50% of personality, this single factor of personality interest accounts for roughly 1/3 of what we'd expect from all genetic influences combined. This finding has important implications for personality testing. It suggests that when we measure personality, we're not just measuring the traits themselves, but also how attuned people are to their own personality characteristics. Think of it like measuring temperature. The accuracy depends not just on the actual temperature, but also on how sensitive your thermometer is. These results raise important questions about how we interpret personality tests. Should we adjust our understanding based on how interested or aware people are of their own personality traits? The researchers suggest this might be necessary for more accurate personality assessment. Section 5.3 Perspective of Evolutionary Psychology explores personality through the lens of evolutionary psychology, revealing some fascinating contradictions between common perceptions and research findings. Let's begin with how Japanese society is traditionally viewed. Most people see Japan as a strongly collectivist culture, and there's a common explanation for this: the historical practice of rice cultivation. Japan's geography, with its numerous small rivers in narrow plains between mountains, required communities to cooperate closely for rice farming. This environmental factor shaped not just farming practices, but potentially the genetic predisposition toward collectivism. However, research by Yamagishi and colleagues unveiled something quite unexpected. When compared to people from the United States, China, or Taiwan, Japanese individuals actually showed lower levels of trust and stronger individualistic tendencies. They also demonstrated a greater inclination to avoid risk. This finding seems to contradict Japan's reputation as a trusting society with low crime rates. To understand this apparent contradiction, the researchers identified two distinct social systems. The Japanese style represents what they call a parochial altruist system. In this system, people create secure environments within closed communities, maintaining strong bonds with long-term associates. They manage relationships through the exchange of negative reputations, essentially warning others about untrustworthy behavior. In contrast, the modern open system, more common in many developed countries today, operates differently. It's what researchers call a tolerant non-altruist system. This system allows people to move freely between different social groups, builds trust through sharing positive reputations and relies on formal institutions like the legal system as a safety net. The researchers tested these systems' economic efficiency through an internet auction experiment with 791 participants. The results showed that the open system, emphasizing positive reputation, generated higher sales than the negative reputation system. This finding parallels historical examples, such as how Genoese merchants, using a positive reputation system, eventually outperformed Maghribi merchants who relied on negative reputation. These findings suggest that what appears contradictory at first, such as a collectivist society showing individualistic tendencies, might actually be different aspects of the same adaptive strategy. Just as blood type might influence specific personality traits rather than broad personality factors, cultural practices might shape specific behavioral patterns rather than general cultural characteristics. This evolutionary psychology perspective helps us understand why seemingly contradictory findings can coexist and why we need to be careful about oversimplifying complex relationships between genetics, personality, and culture. As we reach the conclusion of this research study, let me walk you through the key findings and their broader implications for our understanding of personality and genetics. The research has revealed several fundamental insights about how genes influence personality. Think of personality as a complex musical composition, while individual notes or genes contribute to the overall piece. No single note determines the entire melody. Similarly, this study found that individual genes, including those determining blood type, have limited but detectable effects on personality. What makes this study particularly interesting is how it demonstrated the relationship between blood type and personality. When looking at specific targeted questions, clear patterns emerged. People consistently showed personality traits traditionally associated with their blood types. This is like finding a clear signal among background noise. When we knew exactly what to look for, the patterns became evident. However, traditional personality tests, which look at broader personality factors, showed less consistent results. This makes sense if we return to our music analogy. Trying to hear a single instrument becomes harder when listening to an entire orchestra. Similarly, the influence of blood type becomes harder to detect when measuring broader personality dimensions. The study also highlighted the complexity of personality development. Just as a river is shaped by multiple forces, the terrain, the rainfall, the rocks in its path, personality is influenced by various factors, including gender differences in how traits manifest, age-related changes in personality expression, cultural and social influences, individual variations in personality awareness. These findings suggest that understanding personality requires considering all these factors together rather than looking at them in isolation. It's important to acknowledge the limitations of this research. The study focused primarily on Japanese and Korean populations, used experimental AI training data, and couldn't fully explore how gender and age might interact with blood type influences. This is like having a detailed map of one region, useful but not complete enough to understand the entire terrain. Looking ahead, this research opens new avenues for understanding how genetics influences personality. Future studies would benefit from more diverse population samples, larger data sets for AI analysis, more detailed examination of how different factors interact. What makes these findings particularly valuable is how they help bridge the gap between genetic research and personality psychology. They suggest that while genetic influences on personality might be subtle, they are real and measurable when we look in the right ways. Thank you everyone for your attention and interest in this research. I hope this presentation has provided valuable insights into how AI can help us understand the complex relationship between genetics and personality, particularly through the lens of blood type research in Japan and Korea. I would like to express my gratitude to the original researcher, Dr. Masayuki Kanazawa, for this innovative study that bridges traditional beliefs with modern technology. Special thanks to my professors and colleagues at Pukyong National University for their support.